Marcus Aurelius said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Your enemies aren't trying to destroy you. They're showing you exactly who you are. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to extract more self-knowledge from the people who oppose you than from a decade of therapy, and use it to become someone they can't touch. Most men walk around with a blind spot the size of a building. Their friends are too polite to name it. Their family is too close to see it. But the guy who hates you? He has mapped every crack in your foundation. The question is whether you're smart enough to read that map. Your enemies reflect your shadow self, the parts of you that you've refused to own. Carl Jung spent decades studying why we despise certain people irrationally. He noticed that patients who violently hated a specific trait in others, arrogance, weakness, dishonesty, almost always harbored that same trait in themselves, buried and unacknowledged. Napoleon despised Talleyrand publicly, calling him a silk stocking filled with mud. But historians note that Napoleon's own betrayals and political shapeshifting mirrored exactly what he condemned. The man he hated was a mirror. The psychological mechanism here is projection. When a trait in someone else provokes disproportionate rage in you, not just irritation, but heat, it's a signal. Your nervous system is recognizing something familiar. Something you've suppressed. Your enemy is doing what you won't let yourself do, and your psyche is responding like a smoke alarm. Most men silence the alarm. The Stoic examines what's burning. Criticism from enemies is often more accurate than praise from friends. Seneca wrote to Lucilius, receive without pride, relinquish without struggle. He wasn't talking about compliments. He was talking about identity. Abraham Lincoln understood this deeply. His rivals, men like Edwin Stanton, who once called him a long-armed ape, were later appointed to his cabinet. Lincoln didn't hire them despite their hostility. He hired them because their opposition had shown him they were sharp enough to see his weaknesses and brave enough to say them out loud. Stanton went on to call Lincoln the greatest ruler of men the world had ever seen. The enemy became the witness. Friends are invested in your stability. They need you to be okay, so they protect you from hard truths. An enemy has no such investment. They have every incentive to be accurate about your flaws because accuracy is their weapon. This means their criticism, stripped of malice, is often the cleanest data you'll ever receive about yourself. The Stoic approach isn't to thank your enemies, it's to treat their attacks like raw material. Unrefined, but real. The way you react to opposition reveals your actual values, not the ones you perform. Epictetus, who was born a slave and had his leg broken by his master, developed a philosophy built entirely around this insight. He couldn't control what was done to him. He could only control his response. And he noticed that how a man responds to hostility tells you everything about what he actually believes about himself. Frederick Douglass faced opponents who used every tool available, legal, physical, social, to diminish him. His response was never reactive. It was deliberate. He wrote, he spoke, he built. The opposition didn't distract him from his values. It clarified them. He became more himself under pressure, not less. Under normal conditions, humans perform their values. Under pressure from genuine opposition, performance collapses and the real structure underneath becomes visible. This is why Stoics valued adversity not as punishment, but as diagnostic. If someone challenges your reputation and you spiral into defensiveness, that defensiveness is data. It tells you your identity is resting on external validation. If you can observe the attack and stay grounded, that's data too. It tells you the foundation is solid. Your enemies are stress testing your architecture for free. An enemy's persistence tells you where your power actually lives. Nietzsche observed that people do not bother to oppose what they do not fear. Think about that. When Tolstoy published his later philosophical works, rejecting the Russian Orthodox Church, renouncing his wealth, advocating for peasants, the state didn't ignore him. They surveilled him, pressured his family, nearly excommunicated him. Why? Because his ideas threatened something real. The intensity of the opposition was a direct measure of the threat he posed. The same pattern appears in business, in relationships, in any arena where power exists. Nobody spends energy attacking someone irrelevant. Opposition is expensive. It costs time, attention, emotion, sometimes money. People don't pay that cost unless they perceive a threat worth neutralizing. So when someone persistently works against you when they can't leave you alone, they are telling you something about your own leverage. The Stoic doesn't use this as fuel for arrogance. He uses it as a compass. Where am I meeting resistance? That's where I have influence. That's where I should be paying attention. Learning to sit with an enemy's perspective without agreeing is the highest form of self-mastery. Viktor Frankl, who survived 3 Nazi concentration camps, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that the last human freedom is the ability to choose one's response to any given circumstance. His enemies had stripped him of everything: his family, his freedom, his manuscript, his dignity. What they could not strip was his capacity to observe his own reactions and choose what they meant. He studied the guards who tormented him. Not to forgive them. Not to agree with them. But to understand the psychology of cruelty, which later became the foundation of logotherapy, a therapeutic method that has helped millions of people find meaning in suffering. He converted his enemies into teachers, not by softening toward them, but by staying rigorous. There is a difference between agreeing with a perspective and being able to hold it in your mind long enough to extract information from it. Most men can't do this. When faced with genuine hostility, the ego activates its defenses and shuts the door. The Stoic practice, and it is a practice, not a natural talent, is to hold the door open just long enough to ask, what is true in this? Not all of it. Maybe 1%. But that 1%, owned and integrated, is more valuable than 100 compliments that leave your blind spot intact. 3 things to take with you. First, your strongest emotional reactions to other people are mirrors. Look at what provokes you and you'll find what you haven't faced in yourself. Second, enemies are the only people with both the motive and the freedom to be honest about your weaknesses. Strip the malice, keep the data. Third, opposition intensity is a signal of your actual power. The man who has no enemies has made no impact. The man who learns from his enemies becomes someone they can no longer reach. If this resonated, subscribe. We drop one of these every Tuesday and Friday. No fluff, no motivation poster philosophy. Just the ideas that actually change how you move through the world. Hit the bell if you want it in your feed the moment it lands.